Hello everyone, welcome back to our regular scheduled programming here on the channel with the next video in my deep dive series, the Washington Commanders, number 26. Now I know a lot of people have them in the bottom three. I know that franchise guy had them as dead last. Now I think that there's a little bit more to this team than maybe people are giving credit for, and I think that's just a matter of opinion on how we feel about certain aspects of the team. I think that's going to be pretty evident in this video in particular. I know a lot of you guys who are watching this also watch his videos and stuff. So we'll see where the disagreement's going. I think the biggest disagreement we're going to have is probably on the coaching staff. They hired Cliff Kingsbury to be the new offensive coordinator, and I actually really like that move. I like to make sure to differentiate the responsibilities of a head coach versus a coordinator. That's why you get guys like Josh McDaniels, for example, who I think is a very, very good offensive coordinator. And anyone that brought him in as an offensive coordinator, I'd be really happy about that for that team. As a head coach, maybe not so much. I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to be somebody who could fall under that window, and we'll get to that ranking shortly. They brought in a new rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall. Personally, wasn't a fan. He wasn't a top 5 quarterback for me in this draft. Surprise, surprise. To me, he just screams Justin Fields, but we'll get to that aspect of his game that I believe actually, in a way, makes them not the worst team in the league, but also puts a giant cap on what they could possibly be. They went out and they signed some serious veteran help out there, and is going to put those veterans in a position to do what they do best during the season and not necessarily have to be out there all the time. Specifically talking about Austin Eckler and Bobby Wagner. We're going to see Austin Eckler a lot in those passing situations where he's really specialized in, because they have a thumping running back in Brian Robinson, who I also think is maybe slightly underrated compared to others. And of course, Bobby Wagner, the linebacker, I think we'll see him. He probably will end up being a 3-down linebacker just because there's a weakness in that linebacking group there. But I also think that as the season goes along, you'll see other guys being able to step into those roles, and especially in the run game where he really specializes, they can work in some packages there. I believe on 3rd down passing situations to get Bobby Wagner off the field. That's just where he's really regressed in his career. And I'm also got this weird liking to aspects of their offensive line, which I think is also going to help Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury throughout this season to make this team annoying to play. I hate to say, I don't know that they're going to go out there and they're going to beat a lot of people. They are the 26th ranked team in this series, but I do think that they could potentially be that team that, because of the style they're going to be able to play, they're going to be able to stay in a lot of games. I don't anticipate there to be a lot of blowouts. I anticipate there to be a lot of shootout situations. Maybe a blowout here and there because, rookie quarterback and everything like that. But I do think there'll be a lot more points scored than maybe people are expecting, just because of the structure of the offense they're going to be able to run with the skill sets that they have. If Cliff Kingsbury is able to pull that off with Jaden Daniels when he really required more of a quarterback like Caleb Williams. And that's why there was all those rumors about Caleb, that trade up from 2 to 1 that we saw through like February and March and a little bit into April, I guess. But let's start with the rankings here. We're going to start with the coaching staff, and this is, I guess, where the controversy starts in the comments section. So let's start with Dan Quinn, even though the controversy is probably screaming there in the middle of the page. Dan Quinn did get brought in to be the head coach here, which was almost a lateral move for me. I didn't particularly like the decision. Dan Quinn is my 25th ranked head coach. I didn't like the fact that Washington knew they were bringing in a rookie quarterback. They knew they were going to be doing that, and that they brought in a defensive coach. Now, why is that? Now, there's a lot of things out there where if an offensive coach does really well, if an offensive coach is ranked anywhere in the top half of the league in terms of being an offensive coordinator, they're always in line for a head coaching job. Now, I know Cliff Kingsbury had a terrible run in Arizona. Terrible might be a bad word. It was a tumultuous run. I think as an offensive coordinator, though, 12th in the league, I think that's a reasonable ranking for him to come in, where he's just focusing on the offense. He's just dialed into that. And you got Dan Quinn, it's just, he had a good run as a head coach previously, so I'm not completely done with him. I think as a defensive coordinator, he was amazing with Dallas, what he did with that team. He's coming into a roster with significantly less talent. than he had in Dallas, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's a big reason why they made it a priority to go out and get Bobby Wagner. So he had some like hard veteran presence to play like quarterback for him out there on the defensive side of the ball. You know, he gets a good interior defensive line, which is the exact opposite of what he had in Dallas, where he had good edge guys and bad interior. He sort of switched that out here. He brought with him Joe Witt Jr. to be the defensive coordinator. He was the secondary coach and the defensive passing game coordinator for Dallas under Dan Quinn's staff in Dallas. And we saw that he did really great things with that secondary. So I rank him the 20th defensive coordinator in the league, which is really high for first-time defensive coordinator, for a first-year defensive coordinator for any team. Because, and I think it was a good decision to bring him of all people, because the secondary, as you're going to see, they're so poor, they're so inexperienced, there's a lot of like weird skill sets that need to be worked out, and I think he did a really good job of that, navigating that aspect for the Dallas Cowboys, and him and Dan Quinn together really worked well to build a good defense in Dallas. So, though I think the talent may not be there, I think they've got a decent little coaching staff here for defensive minds to develop what we're seeing on that side of the ball. They have George Banco, the defensive control coach. Tommy Donatel is a defensive backs coach. He's the one that's taking on Witt's old job, I guess, in the staff. And he was actually with the Chargers last year as the defensive pass game and secondary coach coordinator. So, I mean, he's got a lot to prove based upon the performances of that Chargers defense in those aspects last year, though they were riddled with injuries. I do like that they've done sort of the strategy, it seems, with their position coaches the same way Dan Quinn did it in Detroit. So when you look at the defensive staff, there's a lot of these ex-players who actually played relatively recently. You know, there's Sharif Floyd, who's going to be the assistant defensive line coach. There's William Gay, who's going to be the assistant defensive backs coach. They're preparing these players who almost bring like a modern, I would say like a modernized look to maybe relate to players a lot better. We saw that work so well in Detroit, so I think that copying that in a way could prove to be quite the asset for them moving forward. Another guy who's not going to be pictured there, who's going to have ties to both Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury on the offensive side, is Brian Johnson. He's the assistant head coach and the offensive pass game coordinator. He's coming over. You might know his name. He was the Eagles offensive coordinator who took over for Shane Steichen. So we did see some regression there in that Eagles offense, but he does have coordinator experience, and he has offense, and it's obviously on the offense side of the ball. So this is sort of the bridge, I would say, the bridge role between Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, sort of linking the two different sides of the ball together here. David Blau, I think, is one to look out for. You know him because he played really recently. He's the assistant quarterbacks coach. He just was a player on Arizona 2 years ago. So he's coming over with Cliff Kingsbury, ironically, who he was a backup quarterback for. I think he got some plays in there too during that period. I'm really high on their offensive line. Their offensive line coach is Bobby Johnson, who is coming over from the New York Giants. And as a Giants fan, I'm going to give you two completely separate opinions here. I am so happy they hired him to be their offensive line coach, and that's because he sucked. He absolutely sucked. He was arguably the worst offensive line coach, in the NFL last year. The Giants' offensive line the last 2 years have been so horrifically terrible. Evan Neal did not develop. John Michael Schmitz did not develop in his rookie year. There was just Andrew Thomas, I would say, slightly regressed, even though I think he's still an elite level left tackle. The fact that he isn't spoken of consistently as a top 3 offensive tackle because of the last 2 years, that's on this coach for just being so poor at it. So good job for them from a Giants fan perspective, a division rival perspective. Not so good for Washington Commanders fans. Though you guys do have the talent. I do like them. The chances of guys getting better, though, sort of are dead to me at this point. And I think when you hear that name and you go like, oh, he was the Giants offensive line coach and we hired him, I think that context might freak some people out a bit. Some other coaches of note here. Anthony Lynn is the run game coordinator and running backs coach. He's got a history with Austin Eckler. Ken Norton Jr. is your linebackers coach. Ryan Kerrigan, the legend, I would say, I guess, of the Washington franchise. He's the assistant linebacker / pass rush specialist. So he's going to be working with those guys in that scenario. You got John Pagano, who's going to be a defensive assistant there. So just, there are some names here. Another name, Daryl Tapp. Him and another player who played very recently, him and Sharif Floyd are going to be the ones coaching the defensive line. So I would anticipate that defensive line to maybe play fast, to play, a little bit smarter, to have a lot more of a modern look. So maybe outperform as the season goes on what they're probably going to look like in the early weeks, which is the grade that you're going to see here that I'm going to give them now. But yeah, overall, it's the 23rd ranked coaching staff for me. There's a lot of guys with a lot of things to prove. There's some duds in there, and I think that there's some potential in there. I just don't know. This staff, to me, again, like I said, kind of reminds me of that Detroit Lions one, where it's got the potential to grow, and if the players can buy in and they can create a good culture here in year one, where they're really loving the staff and they're loving each other and they're feeling good and they're able to at least stay in games. Obviously not winning a lot of games, but staying in games, it could really help them accelerate their growth. And this could turn out to be a really good team, that's a really well coached team with a really modernized look to it in the next couple of years, if they're even given that amount of time. But yeah, 23rd ranked as of right now. So let's get right into the quarterback here, and it's Jaden Daniels, the rookie. He's tied for 26th for me with a 77 grade. Marcus Mariota is the quintessential backup. He's been brought in to basically be Jaden Daniels light in case, he goes down. They're designing the offense completely around Jaden Daniels, the play call style, all that strategies. And what you want is you want a backup who could come in and you don't have to throw out that playbook. And because of Jaden Daniels' unique skill set, Marcus Mariota is actually the perfect backup for him of the ones that were available out there. He's got some good experience. He'll be, safe. He'll be good for the film room. Help Jaden Daniels develop a little bit. They also got Sam Hartman, who I believe was a undrafted free agent from Notre Dame. I don't think they drafted him in the 7th round or anything. I think he was picked up as a UDFA. It's hard to keep track sometimes, guys. Those 7th round picks are going to get wild sometimes. But I don't know that he's somebody that's anything other than the emergency third quarterback in this scenario. His skill set, he's sort of like an outlier here. So I feel like he was sort of just brought in. He's a scout team quarterback, practice squad quarterback throughout that. But where Jaden Daniels really accelerates and is really going to bring strength to this offense, we talked about how I get some Justin Fields S5s from him. Justin Fields wasn't a great passer. He may never be a great passer. But what made Justin Fields and actually had Chicago win probably more games than their franchise would have liked had they not made that trade last year with Carolina, it would have taken them out of the quarterback race to get Caleb Williams, is this right here. It's the quarterback run threat. He's 5th best in the league with an 85 grade. I don't really give Marcus Mariota one at this point. I don't know that at his age, a stage in his career, he's really going to bring a significant aspect to the run game. But Jaden Daniels is immediately going to come in and bring almost like an Anthony Richardson level run threat to the season. In that, when Anthony Richardson last year, people were like, okay, he has to develop as a passer a bit. He's got the tools to maybe be a great passer, but his threat's going to be and like the RPO game, the options, all that kind of stuff. And I think Jaden Daniels is going to fall into the same the same sort of column in his rookie year as I think people were expecting Anthony Richardson to last year. That's not a knock on either guy. It's actually a really good skill set for a rookie to come in with in his first year because it gives him an out. If you're just a quarterback who is a statue in the backfield, like a Mac Jones, for example, you need to make sure that a lot of other things are working around you. If this offensive line breaks down because they're terribly coached, or if guys aren't getting open or a pass rush gets through, he's actually going to have the ability to extend plays and actually, hopefully, you can reel him in a way that he's not going to be running around in the backfield 10, 15 yards backwards, but that he's going to be able to escape the pocket, get away, get back to the line of scrimmage, maybe extend a play long enough to get a 2-3 yard gain even, so you're not losing yards. And even open up the opportunity for defenses to have to make a decision, and maybe you'll get a couple big plays down the field to guys like Terry McLaurin. There's huge opportunities there for that. And that's what this really brings to it. And he is really an extension of the run game. More so, I think, than he'll be a true weapon in the passing game, which is a weird thing to say for a quarterback, but his skill set just really isn't there yet. I know he had a great statistical output in college, but the college game is so incredibly different in terms of how players' skill sets are used, how they're utilized, how defenses plan for them, the type of style the college game has. There are all these different things that go into it that make him just not somebody that I would be overly concerned with throwing the ball. I almost want to maybe design a pass rush that is specific to keep him in the pocket. You run some some disciplined front four work on passing downs and make him throw the ball down the field. Sort of like what you would have wanted to do, again, with Anthony Richardson, with Justin Fields. You are going to take your chances with those guys beating you with their arms than with their legs. If they beat you with their arm, you're going to take that chance because it's just not there yet. It can be developed. I think they've got an interesting staff in place to help develop that. But again, the jury's still going to be out on that. I think you're going to see a lot of frustrating moments with Jane Daniels in passing situations. Missing reads, missing open receivers, locking into receivers too long. Stuff that you see with rookies, but I think a little bit more than perhaps you would see with any other rookie that would be taken second overall. This ability right here, the fifth best quarterback run ability, is where Jaden Daniels is going to separate himself from this class and actually set this team up for maybe more success than they should have until teams start to develop schemes throughout the year to contain him and then force him to make reads down the field, make him get to that third read in a passing progression, and that's when you can set him up with traps and disguising zones and disguising blitzes, and that's when you can create a lot of success probably against Jane Daniels this year. Now, this running back room I have tied for 25th. Brian Robinson Jr. gets an 82 grade. Austin Eckler, the veteran, gets an 80 grade from me here. They do have some balance coming in this year. My fear, again, I like bringing Anthony Lynn in to help further develop Brian Robinson. He had a lot of potential early on. The rush blocking in front of him last year was absolutely horrific. And we'll get to those grades as we get to the offensive line later. But his style of running doesn't really suit that to make up for offensive line deficiencies. If he gets solid offensive line play, he could be as dangerous as a lot of running backs in the league. He could get into that top 15 conversation, I think. But he's not somebody like a Christian McCaffrey or, guys of that ilk where if the offensive line isn't playing all that great, they're still going to get yards because they have this high-level athleticism, this high-level IQ, this great one-cut ability to manufacture yards somewhere in the run game by, just high-level intelligence and understanding the defense in front of them. Brian Robinson hasn't really displayed any of that. He's the guy who's going to go downfield, and if he sees a hole, he's going to hit that hole, and then he's going to be difficult to bring down after that. Once he gets rolling, once he gets 2-3 yards down the field, he's a tough guy to bring down. So I would look out for that. Chris Rodriguez is a third back. They got 2 rookies in there. I wouldn't be overly concerned. Austin Eckler's grade is awfully close to Brian Robinson's grade, but I really don't expect him to be much of a threat on first and second down at all this season. If they're looking to come back in games and they need a receiving threat out there, that's where he's going to come into play as the 5th best receiving back. I still think he has that, and I still think coming into this season, if they use this backfield correctly, they could get the most out of Austin Eckler. Again, kind of what he lost towards the end of his run there with the Chargers. That's still in there, his ability to go out there and run routes and catch passes. So if they can utilize that mostly throughout the season, and that be the majority of his role and the majority of his reps, I think they can have a really effective screen game, check down games for Jane Daniels to make things a lot easier for him. I think that'll help accelerate and make him more confident. And Austin Eckler also, again, we talk about bringing in veterans with the high IQs, that high football IQ, being able to pick up blitzes, being able to help Jane Daniels identify when a blitz is coming there on the field with him, help him out pre-snap. That's an invaluable intangible that's hard to come by a lot. And I think that you can get that with Austin Eckler. Brian Robinson is, he's not terrible. He's serviceable as a receiving back. I wouldn't recommend it. Michael Wiley probably can make the team as a rookie here because of his ability above everybody else. The running back room is probably going to be 4 guys deep. It'll probably be Robinson, Eckler, Wiley, and Rodriguez, just because of Rodriguez's ability there on first and second down sort of supersedes everybody else. And if Robinson does go down in a game, Chris Rodriguez would have to be somebody who could step in that situation, so you're not driving veteran Austin Eckler with injury histories and concerns into the ground as well. So it's a tale of 2 backfields, kind of like what we saw with the quarterback. The quarterback in the passing game and the running game, very different. I think this running back room's really the same, even though I do think Brian Robinson is underrated to a degree, and I think you could get a lot out of him if this offensive line can perform for him. It's a tale of 2 completely different worlds. Moving on to the receiving room here, the weapons group, starting with the receivers, tied for 29th. Outside of Terry McLaurin, there's not a whole lot going on here. The best 3 guys going into the season by my estimation, Terry McLaurin, of course. I think Terry McLaurin's a true wide receiver 1. Then you got Jahan Dotson, who is drafted in the first round, really needs to come along here. And then you got veteran Jamison Crowder, who's always just sort of hung around the league here. I think he's a really good slot option, to be honest with you. I think he can still contribute, and I think he'd be a real positive asset if he can stay on this team. If they don't find younger options that they think are better than him, I think that he can still be an asset here. They are still tied for 29th, though, so they need Jahan Dotson to be the guy that develops here. And they also spent a pretty decent draft pick on Luke McCaffrey, who's coming in. I think as the season goes on, he'll sort of take over as wide receiver 3. I think that will be the goal. That will be the hope here for this team, for this offense. But I don't know that he's coming in ready to do that. I think there'll be packages for him to be out there on the field. The top 4 wide receivers on any roster get probably more playing time than people expect, at least a decent level snap count. He is going to be competing with Diami Brown, who maybe they haven't given up on yet. Maybe a new regime will look at him and be like, I can't believe they didn't use you properly. Or maybe he will just end up cut and not on the team. There's 2 real possibilities there for Diami Brown. I don't know that he stays on the roster and flounders as getting no snaps at all. I think he's either going to surprise people and get a lot, or he's going to be just off the team altogether. But they need McCaffrey, who they put the draft capital in, and Jahan Dotson, who they put the draft capital in, to be the guys that really step up throughout this year. You know what you got with Terry McLaurin, but what you don't want to be, put in a position where teams can just put one guy on Dotson and whoever else you have out there, Crowder, McCaffrey, Diami Brown, and then just completely take Terry McLaurin out of the game. You don't want to be put in that situation. You need Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson needs to start playing like a first-round pick. And now he's got an offensive coordinator who loves to throw the ball down the field, and he's got a quarterback, a brand new quarterback who they've decided to build the franchise around. I'm pretty sure it's like crap or get off the pot at this point for Jahan Dotson. And decisions are going to have to be coming down for him to make this better than the tie for 29th wide receiver room. Because even when you get into the tight end room, this is where the disasters really start. It's the 29th tight end room. They got the rookie Ben Sinnott, and they got Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is just not the guy. He's a good number 2 guy to come in some passing situations. Ben Sinnott's going to have to be your overall 3-down tight end in this scenario. Maybe John Bates comes in and gets some blocking situations and 2 tight end sets. Maybe you go that direction, but you're starting with a rookie tight end here tied for 29. So you're not starting with the best weapons room outside of Terry McLaurin. And I would say probably Austin Eckler is your second best receiver, which if he doesn't stay healthy throughout the year, that drastically changes the potential of this passing offense even further. But Ben Sinnott and Jane Daniels are going to be in this situation as 2 rookies that they're going to have to grow together throughout the season. And how this team schemes and goes about that's going to be an interesting watch to see. And, Ben Sinnott, unfortunately, he's the safety blanket. And as a rookie, he's going to make mistakes. So you've really been left with one safety blanket, and that's Austin Eckler. And maybe Zach Ertz comes in and his veteran presence serves as somewhat of a safety blanket. But this is where it's going to get rough for Jane Daniels, who's not coming in as a great, well-rounded thrower, a great, well-rounded passer. He would have been better ending up in Chicago. Now, that's obviously Chicago's coming in with like a top 3 wide receiver room, a top 5 weapons room overall. But this is going to be the moment where these guys are going to have to start stepping up, because if Jahan Dotson doesn't step up, they're not going to wait on him at this point. This coaching staff has come in. They've got their quarterback. They're not going to wait on these guys who are these developmental projects in year 3, year 4 of their careers and give them these long ropes. So Jahan Dotson, this may be the year that Jahan Dotson needs to play, or else Washington's taking a wide receiver in the next draft with their top pick, whoever that may be. And Jahan Dotson is looking on his way out, because it'll be McLaurin, McCaffrey, and whoever it is that they draft next year in the first round. So this is a make or break year for him. He's really going to have to step up. But there's not, the depth just isn't there. So that's why, another reason why these young guys, these unproven guys around Terry McLaurin are going to need to have accelerated development here and show flashes and show flashes early and play smart football, be disciplined out there on the field, because it's not looking, it just doesn't look great. I would say this is the best part of this entire offense. It's the ability for the offensive line to pass block. There isn't really, I would classify, a weak link here. You got Andrew Wiley, who, maybe was overpaid, but I still think as a pass blocker, he's still really good at that right tackle spot, still very serviceable. Nick Algoretti, who came over from Kansas City, I think he played really well when he had to come in for the Kansas City Chiefs. He sort of took over the spot of Andrew Wiley when Andrew Wiley left. He sort of became that all-purpose tackle for Kansas City. Then you got, the veteran at left tackle, Charles Leno. Then you have Sam Cosmi, who really had a breakout year last year. He was undoubtedly their best offensive lineman, arguably the only true consistent offensive lineman throughout both phases of the game. They really did a good job solving their center issue here with Tyler Biadasz, bringing him over from Dallas to be their center. So they have a nice balance here to their offensive line in the passing game that really lifts the entire group up overall into this top 5 spot. And I think they're really going to surprise people. I think Jane Daniels is going to have a lot of potential here as long as their offensive line coach is better than he was just the last 2 years for a Giants team who couldn't block a desk lamp on to the right of Andrew Thomas. So there is that going on here. Now, is there enough veterans in here where you're not focusing on getting rookies up to speed? There is a lot of that, at least in the starting five. They did draft Brandon Coleman, who I don't know that he gets on the field all that much. You know, Braden Daniels is another option there. He's a younger guy. They got some veterans like Michael Dieter, who I think Michael Dieter is a tremendous fourth interior offensive lineman, can play center, can play both guard spots. So that's a real good safety blanket for them to have as the season progresses. You know, people get injuries, you know. So if you need a guy who's going to step in at one of those three interior offensive line spots for a couple games throughout the year, you know, a game at center or 2 games at guard or whatever, I think Michael Dieter is a really great talent to have out there. His veteran presence is going to be, I think, should be valued throughout the year. Not a whole lot of depth, though. There really isn't a whole lot of depth. Like, Braden Daniels is going to get opportunities to compete just because he's the young buck in this group. But if you're hoping for development of these offensive linemen, I wouldn't hold your breath based upon who your offensive line coach is. Maybe it'll prove me wrong, but freaking yikes. And when you get to the run blocking aspect, they're actually tied for 20th. This is where they take a bit of a dip here. Because really outside of Cosme, who is a tremendous blocker in the run game, and Biadash, who is just as good in the run as he is with the pass, there's not a lot going on. That left side especially is a bit of a nightmare. Andrew Wiley, I think, is just kind of serviceable at the right tackle spot. If you can find a better option at right tackle and he's a better guard option than Algaretti, maybe Wiley plays left guard. Maybe that optimizes the offensive line. But who are they optimizing with? You know, Braden Daniels is just kind of whatever. The jury's still kind of out on that guy. Michael Dieter takes a tremendous step back in the run game. I think he's still better than Algaretti. Or Allegretti. Is it Algaretti or Allegretti? Italian names. And Brandon Coleman is just not a run blocker coming into the league. That's just not going to be part of his skill set. He graded out terribly in college in that aspect. So this is really where the true asset of this team, which is the running quarterback, and I would argue a pretty deep running back room with a bunch of different skill sets, could end up in trouble. Just because the talent isn't there. And again, you're asking an offensive line coach who coached up one of the worst offensive lines despite the amount of capital that was put into the individual players that were there, to make this a top 15 run blocking group and to maintain, frankly, the top 5 pass blocking grade, which I think is going to be a tall task. Frankly, I think that these grades are the best case scenario based upon what they're going to be getting from a coaching level, and it's because of their skill set. Like, I'm saying that this coach isn't going to be able to tear down the skill set that these guys have. That as they stand right now, 5th best pass blocking, tied for 20th in run blocking. As long as the coach doesn't screw this up, that's what they're going to be. But if this coach screws it up, then it will get worse. It will get worse. Hopefully you keep your pass blocking in the top 10 and it saves you a little bit. But I have no faith in the offensive line coach at all. I know from experience. I know this from experience. Okay, I haven't missed the Giants game in 20 years. Okay? I've never seen an offensive line that bad. I've never seen an offensive line that oblivious to the things around them. That detached from the play that's being run, from the scheme that they're expected to participate in. So I don't think you can blame me for questioning why should this be any different for this group, and why should I not have high hopes for Brandon Coleman and Braden Daniels to end up developing into the players that they need to be consistent starters for 18 weeks every year. A quick positional summary here. We got the quarterback 77, 84 receiving back, 72.7 wide receiver grade, a 76.2 pass blocking grade. Their wide receiver and tight end blocking I actually gave a B. They're really good in that aspect. They're going to help add to that to the run game and help out that offensive line. Help out with double teams. I think they're going to be really effective part of the run game. The depth is just a huge concern with this team. The depth at quarterback, the depth in run blocking, the depth at tight end, receiver. Like, they just have severe depth issues that unfortunately most teams have to deal with throughout the year. That ends up really hurting them in the long run. But overall, I give them the 19th ranked offense in the NFL, 76.28, the 22nd ranked passing game, 76.2, and the 9th best rushing offense, 76.4. So you can imagine with a top 15 offensive line that this could be a really, really scary and effective rushing offense. So how they navigate that variable could really change how this offense operates. And of course, they had the 5th best pass blocking, so that really props them up to 22nd. It's a huge factor in the success of a passing offense. So if they regress back a little bit, then this passing offense could fall out of the top 25 quite easily. Now let's move on to the defense, and this is where the talent level takes a tremendous drop outside of a few players. We'll start with the edge rushers. They're coming in tied for 30th. Montez Sweat, Chase Young, gone. Doris Armstrong is in. They got Dante Fowler. They got Cleveland Farrell. F.A. Odoba, to me, is their second best edge rusher, and I expect him, this is where he's going to get his work throughout the year. I would expect Fowler to see some work here on these downs also. They have some interesting combinations of pass rushers they could put together, but there really just isn't the existence of an alpha pass rusher. Like, if it's a bunch of edge threes. You know what I mean? Like if you told me Doris Armstrong, Adoba, Dante Fowler, it's like, oh, that's your edge three. That's your rotational guy on passing situations sometimes. I'd be like, oh, you must have a really good edge room. Like, it's a really good, nice balance there. Some probably at least a low end number one. No. They got edge threes for days, which is, I mean, it is what it is from the edge group. You're not going to get a whole lot. They drafted Javonte Jean-Baptiste, which I think a lot of his stuff is going to come on early downs, early on. They have KJ Henry, who I actually really liked when they picked him up. It just didn't work last year. He got, when Sweat and Chase Young were traded, he sort of got thrust into that role, and he didn't really show much of anything. He didn't show really any flashes at all, which is kind of what you were hoping to see. You didn't expect him to come in and just dominate games, but to not really show a whole lot of anything in those situations, that was a tough pill to swallow, and why they really completely rebuilt this edge room to the point where KJ Henry wasn't drafted by this regime, may not even be on the team. They got 5 guys ahead of him minimum in this group. When you get to the interior room, this is where things get a little dicey, because they're the 18th best interior rush with Jonathan Allen, and you got Johnny Newton, who they drafted in the second round, who fell to them. This is where Johnny Newton, I think, is going to get a lot of his early work. He was absolutely freaking horrendous against the run, which I think does open up opportunities to get Deron Payne off the field, even though Deron Payne, I think, is a very serviceable still interior rusher, especially as a number 2 to Jonathan Allen. My question is how long Jonathan Allen stays on this team. If they struggle throughout their first half of the season, is Jonathan Allen somebody who gets traded? There's very strong possibility, I think, of that. That's where Johnny Newton's really going to have to get thrown probably to the fire in developing his ability against the run. But I think against the pass, he's coming in as a pretty solid, very good complement to Jonathan Allen. And that really helps hopefully this is going to help these edge guys, the room of edge threes, get more one-on-one opportunities, because they're going to be focusing more on, getting Jonathan Allen, Johnny Newton on the interior rush, the pocket collapsers. Granted, they are in a division where you got Dak Prescott, you got Daniel Jones, and you got Jalen Hurts. All three of those guys can get out of pockets and can scramble really well and can extend plays really well. Now, if you're not getting the great pass rush here off the edge and it's all the interior, these quarterbacks are going to have opportunities to really escape the pocket from the outside. They're going to be able to roll out to the outside, get around these edge rushers who aren't particularly that great, consistently at least. They're not going to be that great. And that's going to be what's going to hurt them. It's going to put their corners in really, really bad situations, with scramble drills and everything, and that's something you don't want. So you're hoping that with these threats here, this really, frankly, a deep interior room, even if you throw Fedarian Mathis in there here on these interior rush situations, that it's going to open up more opportunities for your edge room to outplay this bottom 2, bottom 3 level that they're currently at. And they could, frankly, really outperform this 18th rank here. Jonathan Allen, he can get back to where he was. I mean, he's got a great coaching staff now that really does great work against, what am I looking for? Against the pass, who've put together great pass rush scenarios, who can run stunts and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a great opportunity here for Jonathan Allen to sort of get back to where he was when he was truly that elite interior rush player. And for a guy like Johnny Newton to be put in these situations early in his career where he's going to be really comfortable. He's only going to worry about getting after the passer, one gap assignment, be a great athlete, beat guys with the athleticism, which I think he's going to be able to do. So this linebacker group is tied for 18th in the NFL. It's got Bobby Wagner and we got Frankie Luvu. Two very different style of players in this linebacker group for these passing situations in particular. There's not a lot of depth here, so I don't expect to see anyone else. Maybe Jamin Davis finds his way into the field here and he develops under this new coaching staff in this situation, but he's mostly an early down linebacker at this point. But Bobby Wagner, Frankie Luvu's, I would expect him as the season goes on to maybe be used as sort of this, poor man's version of Micah Parsons. Obviously, he's not Micah Parsons, but he's played a very similar style through his time in Carolina, the way Dan Quinn utilized Micah Parsons in Dallas, where he was sort of like a stand-up linebacker. He was an edge rusher. They used him in a bunch of different ways before last year when Micah Parsons really just settled in as an edge rusher. I could see Frankie Luvu going back to sort of that initial usage of Micah Parsons that this style that Dan Quinn's defense had, and be a stand-up linebacker sometimes, be a pass rusher off the edge. I think that's a good asset for them to have, and that really helps his grade overall, because I don't think in actual pass coverage he's going to be somebody who's going to be that effective. But I think as just being out there as a blitzing threat, as somebody who can, he's got some great athleticism, he can chase guys down, and to be paired with Bobby Wagner, of course, Bobby Wagner is such a savant, and he's going to be probably the linebacker with the green dot, which is not necessarily ideal, because I think as the season goes on, you're going to want to mostly use him on early downs. And you're hoping that a guy like Jamin Davis or even the rookie Jordan McGee or Michael Walker can find a way to improve themselves throughout the year so that they can be more utilized on passing downs to get Wagner off the field. Because eventually his age is going to catch up with him, I think he's still a great linebacker, but the age is a factor here. And of course with Frankie Luvu, because he's mostly out there as a blitzer more than a coverage guy, you're not going to use him in man coverage situations. He's going to be blitzing or it's going to be in zone. So you're going to want these depth pieces here to develop, because I think if you get in a situation early on, this could be the second level of this defense could be a real issue for them. That's why I think using strong interior defensive line play is going to be something that is going to be very beneficial for them. And this is where the defense falls off a damn cliff. It is the last ranked cornerback room in the entire league. Their best corner is rookie Mike Sainistril from Michigan, who is drafted as a slot corner. You got Tre'Tavious Martin. You got Emmanuel Forbes, who were not good last year. Forbes got benched last year. They're really hoping that with Witt coming in as the defensive coordinator and his specialty at the secondary, that this is where his impact is really going to be, and this is where they need his impact to be. They also have Benjamin St. Juste in there. They got Chigozie Anusium. They got veteran Michael Davis, who will probably see a lot of work as well just because of his experience. It'll be interesting to see what the outside corners look like for this team. I think Sainstrill is so above and beyond better than all of these guys that he's going to have to be on the field almost at all times. Anytime they're in a nickel situation, he's going to be on the field. It's going to be a matter of who's playing on the outside. Martin, Forbes, St. Juste, Michael Davis. I think that's really where it's going to be throughout the year. Anusium, I think he's going to have an opportunity to make the team from special teams play. I think you can look at A.J. Woods in the same light. Caillou Blue Kelly, Tariq Castro Fields, who at one point were looked at as like sneaky good players maybe when they were rookies. It hasn't really worked out there, and I don't know that there's space for them out here just because of the players that are out here on this team right now that this regime in particular has brought in. Between Michael Davis, the two rookies, Woods and Anusium, the rookie Sainistril, and then a first-round pick last year in Emmanuel Forbes, a second-round pick last year in Martin. There's just not a lot of room, I don't think, for those two guys to make this football team in any significant way. If they carry 7, I think the 4 top guys you see there are going to be the ones that they keep along with these 3 here. It's just going to be a nightmare. And this is why I'm talking about having that tied for 30th edge room is a humongous detriment to this defense, because they're going to be more likely than not putting this secondary in really rough situations where there's going to be a long time that quarterback's going to have back there, higher than average time to read the field, throw the ball, and this is where the problems are going to be. Even when we get to the safety room here, they're tied for 29th. They got Jeremy Chin. Cool. Chin, he's kind of a linebacker, kind of a safety. Where's he going to play? You got Derek Forrest, who's a good backup here. It's just it's a nightmare. It really is a nightmare, this secondary. There's not a lot of high-end talent here in pass coverage. Sainstrill, again, is going to play in the nickel. If they put him on the outside, I feel like you're going to have like a Desmond King situation where it's just going to be a complete disaster, so you don't want to do that. This is where that edge room and this secondary, inarguably the 2 most important aspects of pass defense, are so bad. I feel like it's going to be such a long year, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning, where at best you're going to see a lot of shootouts when the offense is playing great, and you could potentially end up getting kind of shit canned a bunch of weeks because teams are going to be just throwing the ball all over you. Let's move over to the run defense, and they're 29th with their edge room versus the run. Doris Armstrong, he's your edge 1 on this team. He's your 3-down edge guy. This is where F.A. Obata gets off the field for me. He's just absolutely horrific against the run. So this is where you could see the rookie Baptiste come in and get some opportunities. I think this is where he's going to live early on in his career, getting these types of opportunities here. Dante Fowler, Cleveland Farrell are sort of benefiting from the lack of depth in terms of how they're going to make this team. I think it's undoubtable that they make this team. It's probably going to be these two, Fowler, Farrell, Obata, and maybe they'll keep another one. Maybe it's KJ Henry, maybe it's Jalen Harris. Who knows? It's going to be a tight racing camp. I wouldn't be surprised if Farrell or Fowler doesn't make the team. Can they go with a younger option? I think all possibilities are out there. I do think that Obata, Armstrong, and of course Baptiste, the rookie, are really the only safe guys here. And then you go into the interior. They're tied for 13th. Again, the interior really saves this front four. Again, you got Jonathan Allen, who does take a pretty big step back here in run defense, but he's still way better than Johnny Newton is coming in. Deron Payne, this is where he shines, man. One of the best run stuffers on the interior in the entire league. This is where he's going to live. This early down work, first and second down, you'll see him come in. When he gets those true passing situations, he may come off the field to get Johnny Newton some reps in that scenario, and that's where he's going to get his rest. But I do think that he could see some reps as well with Jonathan Allen coming off the field in passing situations as well, because I think Jonathan Allen's going to be the best option as like a 3-down interior guy. And then, like I brought up earlier, if he gets traded, now this group goes down because you really just got Deron Payne and you got really no one else. So that could be a huge problem and really drag down this front four in general. You're not expecting, and you shouldn't expect to get a lot of production out of your edge room as individual players. This interior is what's carrying you. So losing Jonathan Allen could be a significant blow overall throughout the year, at least in the short term. So you're hoping that you can get a day 2 pick for him. I feel like that chance was last year, not so much this year coming up. But maybe you can trick a team that feels like they're one interior defensive lineman away and they'll give you a 3rd round pick maybe. If you plan on trading him. He has been very vocal about wanting to win, and that is just detrimental to early success for this team. And here we are with the linebackers versus the run, and this is the real star aspect of this defense. They're the 2nd best linebacker room against the run in the entire league. This is where you're going to live. Up the middle against the run, you're golden. You really are. Because this is where Jamin Davis gets to step in and be your linebacker too. This is where Bobby Wagner is number 1, number 2, top 3 at worst in the league at his position in run defense. Right here, Bobby Wagner. Jordan McGee, the rookie, is coming into the league actually quite good against the run. Frankie Luvo is actually pretty good against the run too. So maybe this is an opportunity for him to also be part of like early down edge setting against the run. You could maybe see some of that in there. How he gets used, I think he's going to be sprinkled in a number of different positions, both at stand-up linebacker and defensive end. So I'd expect to see him even on the field in this situation, even though he's listed here with the linebackers. I think that's where he's going to get most of his work. But if they get a lot of struggles at their defensive end spots against the run, even against the pass, Frankie Luvo is the option to drop down into that scenario. And then you're going to have Jamin Davis, Jordan McGee be the guys that step up here and fill those roles. But if that role's here on early downs, it's perfect. That's exactly where you want it to be. You prefer Frankie Luvo to be more of a 5th pass rusher, playing some zone coverage there, some hook zone coverage on passing downs to optimize the power of your defense on passing downs. But here, this is an amazing group. They did a great job here, and Dan Quinn's going to have the exact opposite problem of what he had in Dallas, which was no interior players and no linebackers. He sort of got the opposite problem here. So it'll be interesting to see how that helps him with the overall defensive performance. Now we're moving into DB run support. They're tied for 18th here. Jeremy Chin, again, he's like safety / linebacker. Jeremy Reeves comes off the field here for Percy Butler, who I think is just a better true safety in pass coverage. Though I don't think Jeremy Reeves is anything to really, in run support, I don't think Jeremy Reeves is anything to sneeze at in terms of run support, but I think he's just better served in pass coverage. I think Derek Forrest falls under that same umbrella. How these rookies find their way onto this roster is going to be questionable. I think how they play as slot guys is really going to help. High-level performances on special teams is really going to help, but I don't anticipate, though there is a weakness here in their safety room, for them to supplant any of these 4 other guys here that have previous experience in the league. Especially because Jartavius Martin used to be a safety too, and they drafted him to play corner, so maybe he goes back to safety. Who knows? There's a lot of variables here with this group, but again, just middle of the pack for DB run support. So let's talk about the corners against the run here. They're not good. They're not going to be assets here. They don't improve the run support. We'll just leave it at that. The best part of this defense is, the most consistent part is the linebackers and the interior defensive line. Everything else has very, very massive question marks on, and could, I think, inevitably be the overall downfall of this defense, especially, again, if they move on from Jonathan Allen. If Bobby Wagner doesn't stay healthy, if they pick up any type of injury of any projected starter on this defense, there is room for disaster. It's going to be a rocky season defensively for this team. So they are coming in as the 30th ranked defense in the league, 71.02. The 31st ranked pass defense, 70.1. But the 14th ranked run defense, 72.4. It's going to be very difficult to run the ball on this team in between the tackles, like we discussed. And how they run contain on the outside is going to be a real difference maker in this overall defense's performance. So just the full overall perspective here, again, 26th ranked team with a 75.77 grade. Coaching staff is 23rd with a 79.5. The total offense is ranked 19th with a 76.28, and the total defense 71.02 for 30th in the league. They brought in this coaching staff that's ranked highly to improve that defense. That's what the goal is here. And if that defense doesn't improve, it's going to be a short-term staff, unfortunately, and could prove to be a waste of a coach cycle, which is unfortunate because I think Dan Quinn, as a defensive coordinator, was fantastic, top 5 in the league. But yeah, this is where they rank. It's going to be an interesting year. It's going to be a volatile season for Washington Commander fans. So there you have it, my number 26 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Washington Commanders. Maybe they'll be named something else by the time this video comes out. Who knows? Bring back the... Don't want this video to get censored, but you know what I want them to bring back. It was a real logo with a real name, with a real support system, and a real history. And I will see you guys with the next video next time. Leave in the comment section what you thought, and there's the rest of the series on either side of my head, right there and right there, kind of, maybe. How am I looking? Bye.